Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06. It's O'Connor and Company here on this Tuesday morning, the 18th day of June. It's primary day in Virginia, and as you know, we've been covering it for several months now. Looking forward to tomorrow. We'll be announced the nominees for both parties and then get set for the general election. Now, coming up at 7:35, we're going to check in with Nick Minock of Channel 7, who's been reporting on some behind-closed-doors meetings of the Loudoun County School Board that you should pay attention to. Also at 8:05, the chairman of the Republican Party, Rich Anderson, will talk about today's festivities. And then at 8:35, Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics on the latest out of the 2024 polling. I am Larry O'Connor, and she is Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning. Good morning.
Again, I just want to check in on you. Are you okay?
You have to tell them why you're asking.
Well, New York
that.
Magazine has a cover story now asking, and I'm sure it's in all sincerity and great compassion, are Republican women okay?
Yes.
They think they're not okay. And as usual, writers for New York Magazine, that's who you want to ask to really understand Republican women in this town.
Yeah.
Joining us right now is Maryland State Senator Justin Ree-dee. He's Republican representing Carroll and Frederick counties. And he joins us now on a whole host of topics. Good morning, Mr. Senator. Good to have you.
Good morning. I for one, it just happened New York Magazine just figured out what a woman is.
Honestly.
Good point.
I'm married to a Republican woman. She's doing great. So
Good to know. Good to know.
That's all I can say. So, yeah.
They're the best, aren't they? All right, so last week, Governor Wes Moore signed an executive order that involves emissions linked to, again, this concern over carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And I guess to sum it up, Governor Moore thinks that by unilaterally using his executive orders to limit gas stoves and driving automobiles in Maryland, that he's going to save the planet and bring the temperature down single-handedly. Is that, first of all, regardless of his motivations, is he even allowed to do what he did?
Well, the executive order, it's very yes, because there's a number of things that they want to do that will require legislation to pass. Like, eventually, it's clear they want to do a driving tax. They want to pass I think there's a motivation behind the activists in the administration that want to have it to where we can do some sort of, toll for driving on roads. It's just a cleanliness toll, kind of like what New York was talking about doing. A lot of that kind of stuff would take legislation. But what the left is very good at doing is setting up the administrative state to then say, to establish the goals that they then, of course, we have to meet these goals that we ourselves established. And so we have to pass this legislation. Otherwise, we can't meet our climate goals, which we ourselves established, because it's an existential crisis. What this executive order largely does is it sets up a climate sub-cabinet in the state government. It puts all of the state or many state agencies on the hook for coming out with plans for how they're going to meet and how the state is going to meet very aggressive climate emission goals by 2035. So it's not that today there's going to be a driving tax or even maybe in 6 months, but there will eventually, before too long, be a push to say, well, look, the Department of Energy in Maryland has set these goals because we have to meet these goals. So we have to now do all of these radical things. So it's part of building that administrative state.
But they don't actually have to do any of these things. He's just setting up this new, unenforceable mandate, as it were, that if you state legislatures wanted to, you could just look at the governor and say, well, that's nice. Thanks. We're going to go about our business now. So this really sounds like Wes Moore is setting himself to be the perfect running mate to Gavin Newsom in 2028.
Let me tell you something. I think it's quite possible Wes Moore's, looking at maybe setting himself up for more than that. But I think what's happened is, and it's really interesting, in Maryland, of course, we're basically a one-party controlled state now. And what's happening is Governor Moore, for example, there's some things that he does that he's for or that he's championed on the business and side that are actually not bad. Whatever happens, though, is whenever his ideas run up against the hard left on social policy or environmental alarmism, that side always wins. And so this is basically putting into place the mechanisms for a sort of what I call a green raw deal for Maryland. Back in December, the State Department of Environment came out with a very aggressive plan that would cost over $1 billion a year, and these kinds, especially it would cost ratepayers, taxpayers, these kind of things over $1 billion a year. We didn't move on it in the General Assembly because we have a budget problem. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to move forward on it yet. But this is getting it started. This is getting the process in place. This is getting the agencies moving forward to do whatever they can do because they can regulate. There are regulations they'll be able to do to make it harder for you to use gas and natural gas. And that's their goal, is to get everything electrified. Even though all of our electricity, most of our electricity comes from out of the state, and a lot of it's produced by coal. But that's maybe even further into the weeds. But that's what the goal is, for sure. And that's what this executive order is all about.
Senator, Consumer Affairs recently released a report showing that the states that people are moving out of in 2024, and Maryland makes the top 10. It's number 8. And now Governor Moore is going to impose, hundreds of new taxes and fees on residents and businesses. The question is, how much more can Marylanders absorb? But also from a PR perspective, do you worry about how this looks to businesses, to investors who might want to come to the state to relocate there or locate there or open businesses there when it's got an administration that is imposing these crippling taxes on both residents and businesses?
I do, and we've seen it time and again. And actually, Maryland, even under Governor Hogan, who did a lot to try to roll back regulations and tried to roll back taxes, he could not often get tax cuts through the General Assembly because of the makeup. But he did about everything he could on the tax and fiscal side to reduce that burden. But even with that, our private sector growth was not as strong as it could have been had the General Assembly not rammed through more and more regulations on business. And as I think you both know, a lot of people think about business like business friendliness is how high the taxes are in a state, and that certainly is a factor. But what really, I think, drives particularly larger businesses, businesses of all kinds nuts, is if you're thinking about doing business or expanding your business or coming to a place, it's not even just the tax rate. It's what's the regulatory and administrative burden that it's going to be put on me.
Yep.
If the taxes are a little higher in this state than that state, okay, I'll factor that in. But if the state that maybe has a slightly higher tax rate but is way friendlier to how I want to do business, that might help sort of move me there. Maryland, though, has all of those things wrong. We have a very high corporate tax rate. We have high personal income taxes, which impact some businesses more. And we have this. We add more and more regulations on businesses and job creators every year. But Governor Moore led off his State of the State address this year talking about the need for Maryland's economy to become more competitive and how our private sector job growth was stagnant. And yet throughout the session, bill after bill after bill, many of which came from his administrative agencies that will come in and ask for bills, would add more regulations, more fees, more requirements onto businesses. And it's sort of like what's the left hand's not talking to the right hand, I don't know, but that's a huge problem, and it is driving people. It's Maryland's high cost of living, something else Governor Moore has talked about a lot, and I agree with him on. Maryland has too high of a cost of living. We keep adding to it. We can't keep adding to it.
Yeah. Well, and Marylanders are leaving. In the last report from last year, more Marylanders left the state than came to the state. It's kind of ironic as you enter the state, and cross the border, you see a sign, "Welcome to Maryland, Governor Wes Moore," and then says, "Leave no one behind." Which, by the way, was his campaign slogan. And it bothers me, Senator, that his campaign slogan is now, put up there as if it's the slogan of the state or the state motto. It's not. But so he's basically utilizing our state signs. Welcome to Maryland. And here's, an advertisement for our governor. That said, leave no one behind is sort of ironic considering that Marylanders are leaving Maryland behind and going to other states because of the climate he's created.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the General Assembly has a lot to blame, too. And we're trying, and as Republicans, we've been trying to put forth a very positive common sense agenda. And look, as I've told you guys before, we want to work with Governor Moore on things that will improve Maryland's business friendliness and bring down the cost of living. Yeah. But, every time we get somewhere on one thing, we end up with more fees and stuff on the other end. So it's like
I appreciate you saying that, but I just want to, and we're out of time, but don't stop trying to work with him. The only time Wes Moore will try to work with you is if he can somehow screw you or use you for his own political ambitions. You can see exactly who this man is and what he's trying to accomplish. Stop trying to help him.
I'll leave you with this. Back to the climate thing in closing. The worst thing about all this is that it's not even going to do anything that they say. So they'll raise everybody's taxes, try to restrict where people can go and how much they can drive. And we could all shut down in Maryland tomorrow and go dark and live in the dark, and it would make no impact on the weather or the climate at all.
Of course it won't. If he wants to do something to bring down the temperature of the planet, he might want to become ambassador to India or China and see if he can do something there. We'll leave it there. Justin Ree-dee, trying to maintain some sanity in Annapolis. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
It is
later this morning on the Chris Plant Show, the secret Democrat plot to replace Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton's behind the curtain. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
In 2020, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump with black voters in Pennsylvania to the tune of 94% to 5%. Right now, when you poll Pennsylvania voters who are African American, Donald Trump's numbers have more than doubled. He's up to 11%. But the real stunning number, Joe Biden has gone from 94% to 56%.
Wow.
He is hemorrhaging black voters. And by the way, part of this is because of this ridiculous trend now, and you'll hear it in this report, this CNN report, where they give you the head-to-head. Here's Biden versus Trump, and now here's the five-way race when you add Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Jill Stein, and Cornel West in the mix. Well, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the ballots are going to have Kennedy, Stein, and West on the ballot, aren't they?
I believe so.
So why do they give us the head-to-head number? It's not going to be a two-person. Here it is in the two-person race, and then here it is with all the candidates who will actually be on the ballot. Ignore the two-person race. It's not a two-person race. And the only reason they give you the two-person race is because it makes Biden makes Biden's numbers look a little bit better. Just a little bit. Because most of the voters for Kennedy, Stein, and Cornel West are going away from Joe Biden.
That's right.
So the five-way race is even worse. Listen to this CNN analysis, though, because they are literally left speechless by the fact that month after month after month now, the number stays the same. Black voters are leaving Joe Biden in droves.
Joe Biden is truly struggling among black voters, all right? So this is black voters, Biden versus Trump margin. Look at black voters age 50 and older, and you'll see, look, Joe Biden was leading amongst this group at this point by 83 points back in 2020. Now it's 74 points. So, yeah, a slight decline in that margin, but nothing out of this world. Look at black voters under the age of 50. Holy cow, folks. Holy cow. Look at this. Joe Biden was up by 80 points among this group back at this point in 2020. Look at where that margin has careened down towards. It's now just, get this, 37 points. That lead has dropped by more than half, Mr. Berman. I just never seen anything like this. I'm like speechless because you always look at history and you go, okay, this is a historic moment. If this polling is anywhere near correct, we are looking at a historic moment right now where black voters under the age of 50, which have historically been such a big part of the Democratic coalition, are leaving it in droves.
That is a huge drop over a 4-year period.
Yeah. You know, you can hear this after everything we've done. After all the work.
Don't they know he's racist? And, of course, nowhere in there, especially when you break down the numbers between being over 50 and under 50, it's so stark, the numbers of 50 and under black Americans who are leaving Joe Biden. And nowhere in there do they say, I wonder why. And, of course, the reason why is because that those are people who are raising their families, who are trying to eke out a living, who are trying to pay for eggs and meat, who are trying to put gas in their car, and, oh, by the way, who also want their children to be protected in public schools from teachers and administrators convincing them that they were born in the wrong body. Here's a little bit more of this, if we could. This is CNN freaking out over Joe Biden's lack of black votes.
CNN senior data reporter Harry Enton is with us. So where does the race stand among African-American voters right now?
Yeah, I keep looking for this to change, to go back to a historical norm, and it simply put has not yet. So this is the margin, or Biden and Trump among black voters, compare where we were at this point in 2020, compare where we are now. You know, at this point, look at this. In 2020, Joe Biden was getting 86% of the African-American vote. Look at where it is now. It's 70%. That's a 16-point drop, John. And more than that, it's not just that Joe Biden is losing ground, it's that Donald Trump is gaining ground. You go from 7%, single digits at this point in 2020, to now 21%. And again, John, I keep looking for signs that this is going to go back to normal.
I keep praying
and
this
I
will
don't
change.
See it yet in the polling. If
that's
anything,
it.
right now we're careening.
You get the picture. And by the way, if I may just continue my conspiracy theory, which is not much of a theory anymore, this is why they're going to replace Donald Trump. This is why the candidate will be black. This is why I assume it's going to be Kamala
They're going to
Harris.
replace Biden.
What did I say? Trump?
I'm
sorry. Thank you. I meant Biden. Yeah, Biden's not. They can't sustain it. This is the end of the Democrat Party if they continue with Joe Biden. They're going to replace him, and it's probably going to be Kamala Harris, and that apparently is going to shore up the black vote, and I don't think it will.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:37. O'Connor and Company here on this primary day in Virginia. A story that we've been covering for months now with all your candidates getting their say, and now you get to have your say, and we're looking forward to seeing what the results are tomorrow. In the meantime, there's much to discuss, including coming up at 8:05, where we'll talk to the chairman of the Republican Party in Virginia, Rich Anderson, about today's festivities, and at 8:35, Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics on the latest 2024 presidential polling, maybe even some Senate races thrown into the mix. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Listen, when award-winning investigative journalist Nick Minock is on the case, you better pay attention to his reports over at WJLA ABC7, and he joins us now. First, Nick, congratulations on those AP awards for investigative journalism, a whole host of them, and you deserve it. Great work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Larry and Julie. Good morning.
So yesterday, the Loudoun County School Board meeting had a behind-closed-doors meeting, ostensibly to reprimand one of their own. What do you know about this meeting, and why aren't we allowed to know about it?
Right. So the Loudoun County School Board met again behind closed doors. Yesterday was a special closed session. So the chair of the school board, Melinda Mansfield, convened this meeting to discuss Deana Griffiths' conduct. Deana Griffiths is the Ashburn School Board rep. Deana spoke to us, Ms. Griffiths spoke to us last week. She told me that she was not happy with the superintendent's job performance, and she did not think a bonus was justified for the superintendent. And it appears that the school board chair did not like that. Perhaps Superintendent Spence didn't like that either. Mr. Spence is making $375,000 right now, far more than the previous superintendent in Loudoun County. And he's set to get a $44,000 raise/bonus just this month because of the school board's evaluation. And if he's employed by June 30th, he's entitled to a bonus.
Okay.
So Deana Griffiths was transparent about where she stood, and the school board said she was out of line. They said she violated policies. I read those policies, and it's still very unclear what Deana Griffiths violated, if anything. Go ahead.
Hold on, Nick. We got to get to the... So first of all, the fact that an elected official granted an interview, spoke to you on the record and expressed her opinion, that is now, she's being disciplined by her fellow elected officials for that? Is that really what this is about?
Yeah, when the school board sent out 2 media alerts leading up to this, and they said they were going to discuss disciplinary action. They did not take that last night, but they made a big deal of it leading up to it. They could censure her. They could take her off committees. They could publicly or privately reprimand her or warn her about her conduct.
For publicly expressing her opinion. She's an elected official. Julie, what am I missing here?
Nick, has she run into this kind of intimidation before? Is this sort of the first sort of disagreement, or has there been an adversarial relationship between this board and Ms. Griffiths before?
I don't know about Ms. Griffiths specifically when it's come to this relationship with the board. I do know that Superintendent Spence has told school board members behind closed doors not to speak to 7 News, specifically me.
Yes.
So I know that's where the superintendent stands. I don't know why he tells school board members not to speak to us. Many of these school board members ran on transparency last year.
Right.
So I would hope they would speak to us.
Nick, it's very strange. Ever since COVID, and I don't know, maybe it was happening before COVID, but I found this to be true in Alexandria, Virginia, is there's this weird sort of reversed relationship between superintendents and school boards. It used to be that school boards are the bosses and they are supposed to direct the superintendent. It seems now in the Northern Virginia region, and again, I think this is beyond Loudoun, I think this happens in Fairfax, it happens certainly in Alexandria, that the superintendent kind of pushes the boards around. Do you find this to be true in your coverage of different areas in the Northern Virginia region?
Certainly in Loudoun County. And it's interesting when you look at the flow chart, the school board's at the very top. The superintendent is next. And so you're right. The school board directs and advises the superintendent, not the other way around. Covering this Fairfax County School Board, on the other hand, they make Loudoun County School Board look pretty good. The Fairfax County School Board I've seen recently has asked tough questions of their superintendent. She has to report to them on a regular basis about how she thinks she's doing. So they're tracking Michelle Reed's performance at the Fairfax County School Board. So Loudoun County is making Fairfax look pretty good right now.
Interesting.
Wow. Well, you're ticking off all the right people, Nick, and we love that about you. But this is outrageous. The good news is Deana Griffiths still works for the voters, for the people. So if you like the job she's doing, it's probably a good idea to show some support. They can't get rid of her, can they? They can't bounce her off of the board. Do they have that power?
No, they don't.
Nah.
And what's interesting about all of this is it seems like this current board in Loudoun County is trying to shut down transparency in several ways. This year, the Loudoun County School Board shut off cameras when parents speak to the school board during public comment. They also placed additional limitations on public comment. They discussed disciplining Deana Griffiths for speaking to 7 News. And coming up here, here's the next move they're looking at taking. The school board chair, Melinda Mansfield, wants a policy discussed. It's already drafted. They're going to be talking about it this week to not allow school board aides, the aides to the school board members, to say anything adversarial or critical of the school system, even if they have kids in the school system, privately or publicly. And there is a school board aide, Deana Griffiths, school board aide, who has speak during public comment. She's a mom of 3 kids in Loudoun County, and she's pretty vocal, or has been at least in the past, about how she says there's a biological boy on her girls' team, and that her daughter has to change in front of that biological boy in the locker room. And so it sounds like they want to shut that down. They don't want to hear her perspective.
My goodness.
As a mother.
We will keep an eye on it, and I'm glad that you are as well. Nick Minock, always good to speak with you, sir. Well done. Great job at WJLA.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks. Take care.
Sorry we don't have more time with Nick. He's always on top of good stories, but we do follow him, and we'll have him on a regular basis. He's a good one. 7:44 now. So we went to bed last night expecting a volatile news cycle as video images of fencing around the Supreme Court building sort of permeated social media. And this reportedly was the first time fencing had been erected outside the Supreme Court since the Dobbs decision was announced, thus upending the completely ridiculous Roe v. Wade decision that we had to live under for 50 years. So we thought, oh my gosh, something big is going to happen with the Supreme Court. Literally, that was my last thought as I went to sleep last night. This morning, during our pre-show meeting, our very prescient and observant executive producer, Heather Hunter, pointed out this doesn't make any sense. Big Supreme Court decisions aren't announced on Tuesdays generally. The next day we're expecting announcements is coming Thursday, so why would they be putting up the fencing now? And while we have the answer to that question, it's fake news. That video that was circulated is not from today or yesterday. It was an old video, and it was put up and plastered around, which is weird because there's so many news agencies like are 2 blocks away from the Supreme Court. They could have just looked out the window and said, nope, this ain't happening. Yeah. But strangely, this story got picked up here and there. But if you're seeing that, I guess we're telling you now, because if you're seeing reports of fencing around the Supreme Court in anticipation of some big decision, it's not real. it's not actually happening. So
yeah, that isn't to say it won't happen when some big ruling does, like on immunity and other things. We'll see.
Funny, and I just want to point out, when this story started circulating yesterday, almost everybody immediately jumped to the conclusion that this was going to be the Supreme Court granting some level of immunity to Donald Trump over the investigation, Jack Smith's special counsel investigation over January 6th.
Yep.
In other words, the immediate, instinctive, reflexive thought was that the left was going to riot.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody thought, oh my gosh, they're putting up fencing to protect themselves from rabid, radical, right-wing MAGA fascist protesters. No. And I mean to a man. Even liberal reporters who were commenting on this on social media yesterday is like, oh, it looks like they're ruling in favor of Trump, because they know that the people who are going to be violent, that need to be protected from fencing, are the left-wing Antifa types.
That's right. I mean, you think about when the verdict came down for Trump. Nothing. There was nothing.
That's right. When he was convicted in Manhattan.
When he was convicted. Yeah. They know exactly who goes out there and riots. It's the left.
Right. That's right.
It is not the right. Even though the mainstream media paints, even that, we keep bringing up that New York Magazine article about conservative women and Are We Okay? They have this sort of dismembered body, holding this automatic weapon. We are not the violent. They want to paint us as these violent lunatics, and no, we don't do that. We got jobs.
I didn't see any liberal reporter or any liberal activist or Democrat seeing these videos yesterday saying, oh, looks like tomorrow's going to be good news for liberals. Nope. But all my colleagues was like, wow, I can't wait. This is going to have to be a great decision if they're trying to protect themselves from the mob. It's 7:53.